first.
Like scary movies? What's your favorite scary movie?
Here's Johnny.
We'll tear your soul apart.
The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
Game over, man. Game over.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream. Stop the prime time, bitch!
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, I'm the SaWGuy, and I'm bringing you episode 23 on Fright Night. For real. I had to throw that quote out there. If you've seen this film, you know what I'm talking about, right? But if you haven't seen this film, you're in luck. Why? Because I'm going to talk about one of my favorite vampire horror films of all time, and this is Fright Night, right? There's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad with this film. Obviously, I know this film was very well known because there's not only one remake, there's two, right? And basically, this whole story, what it follows a young horror fan who is in high school. That's basically kind of like my childhood. You know, in high school, you're all horror fans and everything, right? No, but this takes place in the 80s, right? 1985, it fits into all the stereotype of the cheesy 80 B-rate horror film, right? This came out in its prime. It really did. But anyways, the whole story follows this kid named Charlie Brewster. He's going steady with his girlfriend, right? But he's a big horror movie fan. So the movie starts off, and then you hear like old movies play on the TV, kind of like public broadcasting, you know, that old stuff, right? And there's a horror host named Peter Vincent, and he's hosting all of these vampire films that he starred in. You know, kind of like in the 60s, you know how they had so many different types of horror films, scientific films, sci-fi horror films, you know, all that crap. And, well, anyways, the movie starts off, they're making out and everything, and then he's trying to do the normal guy thing, like, come on, baby, let's go all the way, you know. It was very cheeseball in the 80s. If you lived in the 80s, you all know what I'm talking about, right? But anyways, the whole story starts off like that, right? All of a sudden, she finally gives in after he's like, well, come on, we've been going steady, right? So she gives him the okay, and then as everything starts getting comfortable, he looks out his window and he sees two guys carrying a coffin, right? He sees this one guy carrying the coffin with both hands, and then he sees this other guy in a gray trench coat, and he's holding it with his fucking finger, carrying it into the basement, right? And he starts freaking out. He's like, wait a minute, there's guys next door carrying a coffin in there. So, you know, young high school teenager love, they're kind of bickering. She storms out, and then, you know, they start having kind of like their lover spat, you know. Then it implies that his mom's like just kind of chilling and saying, hey, what's going on, you know, and, you know, kind of doing the teasing like, oh yeah, you know, it's best to get out all of your frustrations because when you get married, you know, you're more likely to argue all the time, get a divorce, da-da-da-da-da, right? All that dialogue. And then basically Charlie Brewster, that's the main character's name, he goes and tells his mom, well, hey, somebody's moving in next door. And then she's basically telling him, well, they're going to have a lot of work to do because that's the one house on the block that, like, needs the most work and it's crappy. And we can all relate to that because we all know living in a neighborhood, there's always that one house like, I ain't going in that shit, you know, or, oh, that's a crazy house over there, you know. We all can relate to it, you know. And that's what I loved about this story because it wrote it very well. Anyways, she storms off and him and his mom, they start talking about, like, the neighbor moving in. And then the next day, he gets kind of curious because he's at school, and then you, the viewer, you meet his best friend. His name's Ed, but they call him Evil Ed, or Evil. And he's coming out of class, and he's basically like, what the fuck? He failed his trig class, or his pop quiz, or whatever. Then you see his girlfriend, Amy, just walk past him, kind of stormy. You know, teenagers, lover spat, stuff like that. Anyways, well, he gets home, and he basically sees this chick. She gets off this taxi, and she's like, oh, wait a minute, is this the address? And he's like, oh, no, it's next door. And classic cheeseball, you know, they're wearing the full blouse and everything, the low-cut shirt all the way down, and he's just like, whoa, wow, she's hot, you know, and then goes in the house, starts talking to his mom, and they start cracking jokes like, oh, well, he's living with a dude, you know, probably they're a couple or something, you know. Anyways, he goes up in his room, he studies, and watches horror films of Peter Vincent, this, you know, He's kind of like a male version of Elvira, so he's kind of like a horror hostess, but he hosts he hosts his show with all of his own movies. So he's watching it and studying. He falls asleep. He wakes up to this scream, and he's like, "What the hell?" And then he's snooping out the window, and he basically sees that, one of his, can't even talk right now. The vampire's buddy who works with him, his name's Billy Cole, and I'll get to that in a second. He's setting up his car, getting it all ready, and they were going to, put a body in a bag and throw it in there because you find out that Jerry Dandridge, the guy who lives there, the main guy in the gray trench coat, he's a vampire, right? So he starts seeing these things little by little, and then they load up. He goes out there. He wakes up his mom. Mom, the neighbor, he's a vampire. He goes out there, kind of like, it gets you in that moment like, dummy, why the hell did you go out there? He goes out there, and then you see Jerry. He comes out, walking from the top, turns to a vampire, shows a camera angle, and he goes down, and he's eating the fruit, right? Then his mom comes out and starts screaming for Charlie. He runs back in. So the vampire, Jerry Dandridge, and his friend, they kind of suspect, like, okay, he knows something, right? Later on through the movie, before that whole scene happened, I got a flip-flop because I've seen this movie so many times. He kind of snoops around the house, and the friend of his, Billy Cole, he tells him, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, nothing." "Well, make sure it stays that way, kid." Like, kind of in a creeper way, right? He basically stares out his window, and it faces Jerry Dandridge's window, like the main bedroom window. And he sees, basically, Jerry Dandridge, like, opens up his mouth and fangs come out. And then that's when he realizes he knows he's a vampire. That confirms it for Charlie, right? Then that whole scene happened that I just explained. And then he goes and says, "Oh, shit, there's a vampire," right? So he goes and alerts the police. I'm laughing at this. I know I'm having trouble, but I'm laughing at this because it's so cheesy. He goes and tells the police that there's been a murder. He recognizes the two women that were dumped off without their heads and everything like that. So he goes to the cops, and the cops, they go and they look into Jerry Dandridge's house. Obviously, Jerry Dandridge, he's not there because he's a vampire and he's asleep during the day, right? And then he's looking through all Jerry's stuff and everything, and then Billy Cole's like, "Oh yeah, my name is Billy Cole." And I laugh at that fucking name because it's the 80s. During the 80s, you had like two names as one, I'm an 80s baby. My real name has two names in it as one, so I could relate to that shit. But anyways, he starts telling him, "Well, there was bodies back there. I saw them pulled out in trash bags." And Billy's basically saying, "Well, they were trash. I don't know what you're talking about." And then he's telling the cop, "Oh, no, I'll show you the trash." And then Charlie, he's basically like, "Oh, no, what I saw had a body in it," right? And then he's like, "Did you see the body?" And he's like, "Well, no." Then he basically kind of blurts out to the cop like, "Hey, wait a minute, he's a vampire. You'll find him sleeping with the undead." And then the cop thinks he's all crazy. Comes out, "I got a coffin for you. Don't you ever come down to the police station again, forever, or I'll lock your ass up." Like that kind of crazy shit. At that same time, he goes and catches up with his friend Evil Ed and says, "Hey, I need help. There's a vampire. He's going to come attack me," right? And this part always got to me like, what the fuck? Why would you go to your friend's house if you are a big horror movie fan and you don't know how to kill a fucking vampire? But I think it was just in the moment of the panic, right? We've all been there where we panic and been like, "Oh, what the fuck," Let me know in the comments below. I mean, did any of you think that was kind of odd? Like, okay, you're a horror movie fan, you watch nothing but vampire films, and you don't know how to kill a vampire. Like, what the fuck is that? That was my 2 cents on it. But anyways, he talks to his friend, and his friend says, "Okay, I'll help you. Just don't call me evil anymore." And then he gives him $8 and says, "Well, I don't have anything, but here's $8, and it's yours." So he tells him, "Okay, well, make sure that you get a bunch of crosses, get a bunch of garlic, and you should be safe. But you got to have total faith in the cross for it to work." Which is what I like, because, most vampire films, they just show a cross, and basically they're fine. Which, we all know that's kind of cheeseball, kind of bullshit. But that's why I like Fright Night so much, is because it tied into the whole mythology and aspect of vampires and how you have to have faith for certain things to work, right? And he goes home, sets everything up, and while he's setting everything up, his mom invited Jerry Dandridge over, and he's like, "Hello, Charlie." And Chris Sarandon, being how he is, for those of you who don't know, Chris Sarandon, he's the voice of Jack Skellington. So before I found that out, I thought, okay, he's just, a cool, smooth talking guy, kind of like that, right? But I thought it was funny because now if you watch the movie and you close your eyes, you can kind of picture like Jack Skellington like as a vampire. It's kind of fucking crazy, right? But anyways, they talk and everything like that. And before Charlie Brewster knew that he was safe because the only way a vampire can go into the house is if the rightful owner had invited him in. His mom invited him in. And basically he was talking to him like saying, I'm gonna, come over anytime I feel like it. Well, with your mother's permission. And then, his mom being a single mom, like, oh yeah, anytime, right? So they gave him all the right purpose to come back after him. So later on, he goes in his room, Jerry Dandridge comes back, pulls the door really tight in the mom's room and makes sure that, she can't get out or anything. Then he confronts Charlie and they start talking to each other. And this what I thought was a really cool scene is that, when he confronts him, he basically says, I'm going to give you a choice that I don't have. Forget about me and I'll forget about you. Let's go our separate ways. What does Charlie do? He pulls out the cross, fool, and throws him out. And then basically he's going to hang him. Well, he grabbed him by the throat and was hanging him like right over his window and was going to drop him down on that white picket fence. Grabs a pencil that was on his desk, stabs him right through the hand. Then you see his true form as a vampire. Then his mom wakes up and then basically he runs out, because he's like, he doesn't want to kill the mom. So Jerry Dandridge leaves. Charlie Brewster takes care of his mom, who's, I think she's kind of stoned on Valium, because she's like, I had a bad dream. Do you want a Valium, if you're not feeling good? It was kind of funny. They never imply what she did, but I know it gave off the vibe that she worked something in medical, either a nurse or something. But anyways, back to the story. He goes and destroys Charlie's car, goes back to his house, has Billy Cole take care of his wound, and then Charlie starts watching vampire movies, from Peter Vincent. Then all of a sudden the phone rings, he picks it up, and then basically he says, I know you're there, Charlie. I can see you. And then basically their windows are like right next to each other in the house. And he tells him, you scared? Well, you started this. I'm going to finish it. So I'll be there tomorrow night. So, as Charlie's watching these movies, he starts freaking out. So he actually goes to the studio where Peter Vincent is. And he actually meets Peter Vincent. And he tells him, hey, I believe in vampires. Can you help me? There's a vampire next to me. And Peter Vincent, he's kind of like, like those... He's kind of like an older actor who's just like, he's on hard times, basically. And he was telling him, hey, I need you to help me kill this vampire. And he thought he was crazy. So he just says, no, I can't help you, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Goes and leaves. And then his friends, Amy, his girlfriend, and Ed, they kind of went to Charlie's house at the same time. They go in his house, and his whole room, it was funny because it was all decked out like kind of very 80-ish with cars and shit like that. And all of a sudden he has nothing but crosses, candles, garlic, and he's building a stake. Well, his friends get all worried, so they go to Peter Vincent. And they start telling Peter Vincent, hey, can you help him make it seem like, he's not a vampire? Have him, we'll call Jerry, and then we'll see if he can, touch a cross or something, because at this point, nobody believes Charlie, right? Nobody does. So Peter Vincent was like, no, I'm too busy, I'm going to be in this movie. And then Amy's like, well, I got a $500 savings bond. Okay, I'll do it. So they paid him, right? And they called Jerry, and Jerry's like, okay, well, we don't have to go out. Fuck it, whatever. So the next day comes, and they all meet up at Charlie's house, and they basically, Peter Vincent comes out all in full makeup gear and everything, because, he has trouble adapting to life, because here he's played this character as a vampire killer this whole time, but he's really a gentleman. He really was, They go into Jerry's house, and basically, they do this fake test to see if he was a vampire. Now, there's a lot of different theories on this, where he gets water, and he makes Jerry Dandridge drink it, but there's a couple things that I noticed. He holds the holy water, and Peter Vincent says that it's been blessed. He saw it get blessed, but he told Jerry Dandridge it's just tap water. Right? You got that theory. 2, Jerry Dandridge is holding it, and then he puts it by the fire to unbless it. Then he drinks it right in front of Charlie and says, okay, I'm not a vampire. So everybody thinks that Charlie's crazy, right? Well, this is going on. He kind of builds up the hots for his friend, Amy, because she looks like one of his old wives. And then when they're talking and everything, he's talking to Ed. You know, he's trying to be the smooth vampire, you know, to make it very charming, right? So anyways, Peter Vincent, for some reason, takes out his old prop comic. He takes out his old prop, and it was like a, kind of like a mirror, compact mirror thing from one of his movies. He opens it and sees that there's no reflection. He freaks out and drops it. Picks it up, and then he says, okay, I gotta go. So they all left. And then basically, since Charlie doesn't have a car, they have to walk Amy home. So as they're walking Amy home, Ed, he's like, fuck this, I'm gonna go and take this alleyway. He's like, no, don't go there, stupid. What does he do? He goes over there, then he fucks with him and says, oh, he bit me, whatever, you know, being stupid. And then Charlie and Amy start walking one way. Then Jerry Dandridge, he's walking away. He steps on his ground. Well, on the ground. He steps on the floor, and he hears a crunch. And it ends up being the mirror from Peter Vincent's, you know, prop from his from his vampire movie. Then that's when he knows, like, oh shit, Peter Vincent knows. So he goes after Ed, and then he feeds off of Evil Ed's, like, emotions and says, hey, no one will hurt you no more. I'll protect you. I come in peace. Then he turns him into a vampire. He follows Amy and Charlie into this club because they try to sneak into a club because it's all dead. And then it's just randomly one fucking club that's like all with people. I don't get it, right? But anyways, they go in this club. Jerry Dandridge finds them. And then basically he compels her to fall in love with him, I guess. I don't know. It was kind of a weird scene. And then he tells Charlie, like, hey, I just want you and Peter to come because, you know, if you ever want to see Amy again. Because at this point, Jerry knows that Peter Vincent knows that he's a vampire, right? So he's trying to cover his tracks. Takes her back, and then they show the scene where he makes out with her, and then he turns Amy into a vampire. You know, it had this lustrous, sexual feel. You know, I'm a guy, so I'm like, okay, let's speed up the process of the story. You know, as that's going on, then Evil Ed, he goes to see Peter Vincent. He's like, hey, there's a vampire out here. And then he opens the door, lets Ed in, because he's all, at this point, freaking out. Like, what are we going to do? Ed pulls out, shows his neck. No, what are you going to do? You know? And he tries to attack Peter Vincent. Then he comes back with a cross and touches him in his head. That's where a lot of my promos were all like Evil Ed with that burn mark and stuff. Because it was an iconic scene. And then basically he was trying to get him to get out of his house. And then he kept saying, oh, the master's going to get you for this. He's going to get you. Then after that, you see Charlie Brewster come in, and then he's like kind of worried because he thinks that Charlie's a vampire. Then he lets Charlie in, and then he's like, I'm getting the fuck out of here, I'm trying to leave. Charlie's like, no, I need your help. And then basically Charlie's like, alright, if you don't want to help me, then I'm going to go on my own. And then at this point, they don't show, but I know Peter Vincent, he's basically like scared because he's been this actor this whole time, and then he comes in, has to help save this kid because this vampire is actually real. So, as Charlie's going into Jerry's house, Peter Vincent follows right behind him. The door shuts, and it was a cheesy 80s thing, like, what are you, crazy? Don't go through the front. And then all of a sudden the front door opens, you know. They go into the house, and then, you know, they try to use the cross and everything, and then he says, oh, you have to have faith for it to work. Then Billy Cole comes out and knocks out Charlie. Peter Vincent gets scared, so he runs out of the house, goes into Charlie's house, tries to wake up his mom, but it's not his mom. It ends up being Evil Ed. He wakes up, pulls his wig off, tries to attack him. Peter Vincent goes in the hallway, and then he turns into a werewolf. As he's a werewolf, he's chasing after Peter Vincent, and then he pulls out one of the broken pieces of the table that he fell off, and then, you know, just like a steak. Then they show this whole transformation scene where he ends up from like a werewolf back to a human. And they did really damn good on these effects. They really did. I was impressed. I was like, fuck. Even though there was a couple of scenes where you could see like the puppeteering of it moving around, you have to really pause the DVD like I did and been like, I see the strings, I see how they did this shit, you know. But movie magic, right? But anyways, he goes down there and then he starts feeling remorseful because he's taken a life, you know. After Evil Ed's completely transformed back into human, he pulls a stake out and then he goes back into Jerry's house. And at this point, he finds out that Charlie was thrown into the room with Amy. Charlie's all pissed off because he sees that Amy's in the middle of transforming into a vampire. So when Peter gets back in there, he tells him, hey, make a lot of noise, I'm going to break down this door. He breaks down the door, then Jerry hears like, okay, we have a guest. Jerry, he starts going around, and then they find out that he's telling Amy to wake up. They lock Amy in the door. Then all of a sudden they get stuck at the stairs, and then Billy Cole comes up right behind them. Then he says, hey, don't move or I'll shoot. And Peter Vincent shoots him. Then, God, I keep forgetting his name. I want to say Chris Sarandon, but it's actually Jerry Dandridge. That's the name of the character. He comes over there and says, you got me, not quite. And he walks away. Then Billy Cole comes back up after he shoots him in the fucking face. Then he comes up and, you know, eventually he's getting shot like 7 times with a .45 Colt, might I add. So it's maybe a couple steps down from a hand cannon, but it's a powerful bullet. And he's still coming like this, like a zombie. Grabs Peter Vincent, and then Charlie Brewster, you know, stakes him, right? And then all of a sudden you see this awesome scene where he's like, oh, and everything's all melting and everything, and then he turns to a skeleton. They never said what the fuck he was, if he was a vampire, or if he was a, you know, zombie or whatever. I'm assuming he was a vampire compelled to be with Jerry, but I'll give you all my thoughts at the end of this video. But anyways, after they go after Billy Cole and got all that done, then, you know, Jerry Dandridge, he wakes up Amy, tries to get her awake. Then he breaks through the window and then transforms into a bat. And this bat looks fucking ugly, right? This bat goes after Peter Vincent, and then he basically uses the sunlight to try and, you know, hurt Jerry Dandridge. Then he bites Charlie, the bat, and then flies into the basement. They go into the basement, and this is the anticlimactic scene. They find out in the basement all the windows are all painted black. Blacked out, right? They open the coffin, and then they reenact the scene where it shows Peter Vincent from his movies, like, putting the stake through him. At this point, Amy's awake, going after Charlie, playing off his insecurities. You said he wasn't going to get me! Then it shows the reveal of her face, like, fucking teeth like this. Then, you know, they find out that the whole, like, basement is all windows, and so they break all the windows, and then the sunlight hits Jerry, Jerry blows up, everything turns into normal. Close to the end of the movie, then the end of the movie, you know, gives you that same shot like in the beginning, going into Charlie's house. They're making out, having a good time, Charlie and Amy, everything's back to normal. Peter Vincent, he gets his job back, because originally he got fired for only showing his movies no one wanted to watch. He sends a wink out to Charlie and says, hey, now that I'm back hosting Fright Night, I'm going to let the vampire thing rest. Right, Charlie? Wink. And then, so he's talking about, like, different older horror films that he shows. He turns off the TV, Charlie does. Then he sees an empty room with, like, red beady eyes, and then it, like, flashes, and then goes right back to it. And then it's gone, right? Then Amy asks, is everything okay? Then Charlie's, like, thinking about it, and he's like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. At this point, he's done with it. He doesn't want to fuck with it, right? Then at the, you know, they show it's like a happy ending, and then all of a sudden you see the red beady eyes again, and then you hear Evil Ed laughing from a scene where Amy throws a burger in his face. You're so cool, Brewster! The movie ends, right? Great fucking movie. I know I go too long on explaining these movies, but there was a lot of cool little winks into it. There really was. Originally, Chris Sarandon, he was offered the role. He didn't want to do it because he says, you know, because at this time he was getting to his prime. He had already done The Princess Diaries and a bunch of other films. He didn't want to play a vampire. Tom Holland said, look, read the script, get back to me, let me know what you think. He read the script and said, fuck it, I'm in. You know? So that's how he got Chris Sarandon in. But Chris Sarandon at this time, I think he was still married to Susan Sarandon, his wife. And he had one consolation that he wanted for his character. He wanted his character to be a fruit bat. Which is kind of odd, but then if you think about it, he's a vegetarian. I didn't know that. So I was like, oh, okay. So throughout the whole film, if he's not drinking blood or killing victims, he's eating fruits. Like he's eating an apple, or he's eating like a pear or something, you know, but it's all fruit because, you know, he wanted it to be a fruit bat because he's vegetarian. Cool little wink, right? I was like, what the fuck? I've seen this movie so many times throughout the last 30 years of my life. And I start tripping out on it like, wow, that I would never even thought of that, right? But it's pretty cool little winks, you know? And Tom Holland, he wrote this story. I think it took him a couple of days to write the whole script and the screenplay and everything. But, you know, what makes this film stand out so much is the fact that it compensates and it intrigues horror fans like us, because here This is all happening to somebody who is big horror fans like us, and it plays off that, you know, the boy who cried wolf too much, right? This is a little play off of it, because here he's a horror fan and saying, hey, my neighbor's a vampire. Nobody believes him because they're thinking, okay, you're crazy or whatever. You maybe had a bad dream. Because he's a horror fan, which is, you know, pretty rare. You still don't even see that now in movies today, you know? I mean, you see a couple of them here and there that play off of winks to, like, horror fans and the horror community, but not as much as, you know, Fright Night did, which was really great. And he did the writing where it adapted so well to the time frame, you know? Like I said, I joke and said you wouldn't know unless you live in the 80s, and trust me, that's how the 80s really were. It was very cheeseballish, you know? But he got the style down, he got everything written down pretty good, and it's just, the whole story itself was just, wow, like fully fucking complete on it, you know? Other little winks that I didn't know, since I was doing this research and watching the documentaries and stuff, the bat that comes out after Peter Vincent towards the end, that bat was actually meant for a other movie. Some of you may know it as Ghostbusters. I'm not a fan of Ghostbusters. I'm going to say it flat out, right? But the bat looks very close to, like, the creatures from, what was it, Rick Moranis and Sigourney Weaver's character. It has the same shape and everything, same color. And if you actually, like, see it in that scene when it's biting down, like, on the stick that he holded, or the steak, like this, if you just see it for that split second, you'll be like, holy shit, it does look like from Ghostbusters, right? But that's interesting, because they built it for Ghostbusters. They said it was too scary, so they said, fuck it. The people who did the effects and everything and all the makeup, they said, why not use it for this film? So they used it for Fright Night, and it's actually still intact, locked up in a case, and actually Tom Holland owns it. Tom Holland, by the way, he's a really cool guy. You know, I follow him on Twitter, and anything and everything you want to ask him about, he'll let you all know about everything. And then if you haven't seen the documentary on Fright Night, look it up, because, man, that's just, whew, they did this movie fucking great. They really did. I say that about every movie, but I mean, to be on a shoestring budget and then to come away with a good story, with you having to utilize very little effects to it to make it pop, I mean, Tom Holland's your guy, because he turned around and used the same experience, and he developed another movie, Child's Play, right? He even brought back Chris Sarandon to play the main character on it, which was really cool. It's cool little winks, you know? But I know this film is I want to say iconic, and the reason why I say iconic, I know everyone's going to comment me down here and below and let me know and say, you're full of shit. No, I'm not full of shit. I'm telling you it's iconic because they remade it. They remade it in 2011 with Colin Farrell. You had the kid who played McLovin to play Evil Ed, and then you had Anton Yelchin. I can't say his last name, but he was the one from Star Trek. And you had 3 good actors in this film for the remake. And then, since the remake did so-so, because it didn't tie too much into the original, they did a Fright Night Part 2. And Fright Night Part 2, the newer one, that's basically a remake of the first one again. So they remade a remake. Does that make sense? I don't know why they did it, and then they switched up the story where Jerry Dandridge wasn't a male, he was a female. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. But anyways, this film was so good that they decided to actually do a sequel. Now, a lot of people don't know this. Horror fans like us, we know this, but to the general public, they actually did a Fright Night Part 2. It's not well known because when it was coming out, that's when the whole Menendez twins went crazy and then they killed their father. Their father, he was this big movie producer guy. He had his own production company and everything. And when he was murdered by his sons, that's when Part 2 was coming out. And Part 2 didn't get enough notoriety, didn't get enough attention, didn't get enough publicity, didn't get advertised as much. So there was only a few theaters that had it, and then it went straight to video. And the only time that people knew about it was when they go to the video store and they see it right there. And, you know, they did a DVD on it for Part 2. They stopped producing it. I don't know why. It was artisan, but a lot of people complain about the quality. So it's hard to get. Until this year, Amazon Prime, they actually have 1 and 2 in full HD that you can watch of the original Fright Night series. Now, there was supposed to be a Part 3. They never got around to it because of the whole Menendez trial and everything. But Tom Holland has came out and said what Part 3 was about. Part 3 would have been about Charlie Brewster. He's a single father. He has 2 kids. And Evil Ed comes back. Because Part 2, they don't talk too much about Evil Ed. But Part 1 winked that he was still alive. And I have a little bit of theories on that I'll brush up real quick. I think Evil Ed is still alive because when he was human, he didn't leave the stake in him. He pulled the stake out. And I think he healed back up into a vampire. Because he didn't blow up or anything like what Jerry Dandridge did, you know? And I was just like, whoa, what the fuck? Mind blown, right? It changes the whole concept of the story. But I love the whole series. Everything that they did with 1 and 2. The remake was okay, the first one. But when you talk about the second one, not so much. I would... It's... To me, I call it a Redbox movie. If there ain't nothing on and you go to Redbox and watch it, okay, I give you credit for that. You know, as horror fans, we like to watch it regardless, right? But anyways, you know, if you haven't seen this movie, Fright Night, I recommend seeing it. There's a lot of quotes. I still joke around with my family, and we all quote it, because we've seen this movie so many fucking times. You know, we'll quote the scene where Jerry Dandridge and his dad, Jerry Dandridge and Charlie Brewster, you know, where he's talking about, like, waking him in his sleep, telling policemen about me. Me and my dad, we joke at each other all the time about that shit. It's funny because he's not a horror fan, not as much as me, but, you know, he remembers that film because, you know, back in the day, we used to watch the shit out of it, you know? Evil Ed. Everybody remembers Evil Ed. If you see any Fright Night t-shirts, you always see his face with a burnt cross. Ho ho ho, you're so cool, Brewster. I can't stand it. You see that line, you know, written on there, the quote. But it's a good film. It really is. And if you haven't seen it, honestly, take a gander on it. You will not be disappointed. I mean, for a vampire film from the 80s, if you have to name one vampire film anywhere from the 80s, everyone's going to tell you Fright Night. Why Fright Night? Because it is damn good. It won't disappoint. Very good. I can't say so much about the sequels. I've seen Part 2 a few times. I need to go back and get Amazon Prime again so that way I can watch it. Because I know they have it kind of bootlegged all over here on YouTube somewhere. You know, yeah, that's how they do it. But anyways, Fright Night was a really good film. And I'm going to keep beating a dead horse about that. I really am. But anyways, thank you for tuning in on this episode of the SaWGuy podcast. And like I said, guys, when I got nothing or when I'm done, I'm out, right?